This week, Jesus addresses the Pharisees with probably one of the most well-known parables, the parable of the prodigal son and his other brother. This is a story that I think really lends itself to some contemplation. I think there's three options this week. It can be the son who runs away and squanders everything, the father, and the other son. Or even just someone listening, like a Pharisee or someone there listening. It says Jesus is with sinners and tax collectors, and then the Pharisees kind of come in and ask him these questions. Today is an opportunity to kind of dive into all of those. But as St. Ignatius says, the first thing we do in our contemplation is to contemplate the Father gazing upon us with love. We take the moment of an Our Father to contemplate the Father, maybe even with this image of the prodigal son. Maybe he's waiting for you to come home. Maybe he sees you far off. Maybe he embraces you. This is the gaze of a father. Today we get that image in this parable, but maybe it's an image that you can use for your own prayer of you or me being lost, coming to our senses and coming home to the Father and not being rejected or judged, but embraced and forgiven. This Sunday's reading is from the Gospel of Luke. Again, it kind of skips around a little bit. It sets the setting, and then in the Gospel of Luke, there's two other parables before this parable. So, we get the little setting. Tax collectors and sinners are all drawing near to Jesus, and then the Pharisees come in and start to question him. And then Jesus gives some parables about seeking out the lost and celebrating them coming home, like why he's dining with sinners and tax collectors. For them, that might be a redundant phrase, sinners and tax collectors. I think they considered them all sinners. So it's the Gospel of Luke chapter 15, 1-3, and then we skip to 11 to 32, where we get the parable of the prodigal son. I will try to read this expeditiously because it's a little long, so we can get to our contemplation. St. Ignatius says the first time we read through it, we should try to get the setting, like what's happening, where are we, what's going on. And then as we dive in, we try to see the characters, the people. What are they doing? What emotions are going through them? What are they feeling? What are they seeing? What are they smelling? What are they tasting? What are they touching? What's going on in their heart? And then you get an opportunity to be one of them, to put yourself in their place. I think today there's probably three obvious options and then one other option. You can be either the two sons, you can be the father, and there's different ways of feeling that out. And then also I think you can be some of the people just listening to this parable as the Pharisees come and question him, the Pharisees and the scribes. So sorry, not to just give all the emphasis on the bad Pharisees, but the scribes as well. So Luke 15, 1-3, 11 through 33. Tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to listen to Jesus. But the Pharisees and the scribes began to complain, saying, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." So to them Jesus addressed this parable. A man had 2 sons, and the younger son said to his father, "Father, give me the share of your estate that should come to me." So the father divided the property between them. After a few days, the younger son collected all his belongings and set off to a distant country, where he squandered his inheritance on a life of dissipation. When he had freely spent everything, a a severe famine struck that country, and he found himself in dire need. So he hired himself out to one of the local citizens, who sent him to his farm to tend the swine. And he longed to eat his fills of the pods on which the swine fed, but nobody gave him any. Coming to his senses, he thought, "How many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food to eat? But here I am, dying from hunger. I shall go up and go to my father, and I shall say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Treat me as you would treat one of your hired workers.' So he got up and went back to his father. While he was still a long way off, his father caught sight of him and was filled with compassion. He ran to his son, embracing him and kissed him. His son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son.' But his father ordered his servants, 'Quickly bring the finest robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Take the fattened calf and slaughter it. Then let us celebrate with a feast, because this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found.' Then the celebration began. Now the older son had been out in the field, and on his way back, as he neared the house, he heard the sound of music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked what this might mean. The servant said to him, 'Your brother has returned, and your father has slaughtered the fattened calf, because he has him back safe and sound.' And he became angry, and when he refused to enter the house, his father came out and pleaded with him. He said to his father in reply, 'Look, at all these years I have served you, and not once did I disobey your orders, yet you never gave me even a young goat to feast on with my friends. But when your son returns, who swallowed up your property with prostitutes, for him you slaughter the fattened calf.' He said to him, 'My son, you are here with me always. Everything I have is yours. But now we must celebrate and rejoice, because your brother was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found.'" The Gospel of the Lord. I think there's some things to this is where a good study Bible is a big help in these type of things, because the parables especially are very pertinent to the people Jesus is speaking to. So there are things that we would not understand today that they would have understood and would have made the parable come to life in a different way. So this story might, for one, I think, for one, is interesting to me that I've always heard of this as the prodigal son story, but in all these other Bibles I have now, it says parable of the prodigal and his brother. Jesus is telling a story about two sons, not just one, two sons. And we shouldn't forget about the other one, And there's something to be learned by the love of the Father for the second one as well. The first one's probably easier to relate to, but it's helpful to kind of dive into it. The first thing is the Pharisees and the scribes are judging Jesus. The man welcomes sinners and eats with them. So to them, he addressed this parable. So this is the context. Jesus is getting a little bit of a reputation for hanging out with people that you don't hang out with. They're not, they're lost, sinners. And he's getting scrutinized by the Pharisees and the scribes, saying, "What are you doing? We don't do this. This is beneath you." I don't know what they're thinking. So he gives them this parable of the two sons. The first observation is that the son asking for his inheritance now is like him saying, "I wish you were dead," or "You're dead to me." Because you don't get your inheritance until your father dies. You don't get it. You don't get what's coming to you from your father until he's dead. So not only is he asking for this presumptuous thing, but he's kind of saying, to me, you're dead. I no longer am your son. I'm out. I'm your son as long as I get this money, and that's all I see this as, and I'm gone. The second thing to observe is, he finds himself with feeding swine, which would have been, like, as a Jew, like the lowest of low things to be doing. Swine are unclean, and now he can't even eat what they're eating. Like, he's below the swine at this point. And then I love this line, he comes to his senses. And I think if we're imagining being this son, we can imagine many moments in our lives where our lives have been dissipated. It says he spends his life in dissipation, and it just aimless and gone, and it just scatters and it's dissipated. And then we have moments that we come to our senses. Sometimes we might have moments where we come to our senses. We don't fully come to our senses. We don't leave our place where we're at. We stay there for a variety of reasons. It's comfortable. It's too hard to change. It's too hard to admit that we're wrong. It's too hard to admit that we've hit rock bottom. But then he comes back, and then we start to see these observations from the father, that a Jewish father, a Jewish elder, would not run. He would never run. It was kind of seemed as demeaning as a elder to run. As children run and kids run and younger people run to other people. Otherwise, they let them greet them. And then secondly, his son was unclean. Feeding with the swine and being with the swine. His son would have been unclean to him. And even this embrace, he doesn't even think about it. He doesn't even think about this uncleanliness. He just like goes all in. It doesn't matter to him. And then he gives him the ring and a robe, and he not only kind of restores him, but is even elevated. And we see this with even humanity, that our createdness is elevated by our fall in some ways. We fall, we've left. Now we have Christ in us in a completely new and profound way, that we are, as the story with Lucifer, that we are higher than angels now. Because God became man to redeem us so that we can become like him. We can, in a way, be divinized like him. So it's like this son runs away in dissipation, and the ridiculous love of the Father doesn't just restore us, but even elevates us higher when we've come back to him. It's crazy. And then we get this other son who, I've been taught rightly doesn't come into the house, because now the house is unclean, actually, and he wants to stay clean. The house is unclean. The whole house is unclean because of his son. Like, ritually, they're unclean because of the son who has come back and embracing everyone. And so he stays outside of the house, potentially for that reason, but also some protest in some way. And one of the other commentaries I read said, that the way that both of these sons viewed their father as this like very legalistic understanding was wrong on both sides. One took it and ran and used him for that. The other became a slave to him and tried to earn it and work for it, but it wasn't the love and relationship that they had. They were both separated by that. And the Father shows both of them that it's more than that. Everything I have is yours. Everything I have is yours. So there's this legalistic relationship that the sons have to the Father that somehow doesn't get articulated to the sons. My son, you are here with me always. Everything I have is yours. But now we must celebrate and rejoice because your brother was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found. So now I think there's opportunities for us to contemplate being one of the characters. I think if I'm the son, it's an incredible moment that we can probably all relate to, dissipating our lives in greater or lesser extents and being lost and feeling worthless and feeling like we're not worthy, and we would just be happy to come back and be servants, the lowest of the low. And the embrace of the Father is like shocking, because I've rehearsed this speech. Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son, but I'll serve you. And the Father like interrupts him with joy and this lavishness and this ridiculous mercy, undeserved, this ridiculous mercy. And I think if I'm the son, it's just a moment of speechlessness. I'm just kind of, I don't even know if I say anything the whole night. I'm just like shocked. And I don't know if maybe you've been there, receiving the Lord's mercy at some points. You know, I can recall that happening numerous times, you know, on retreats, thinking myself to be unworthy, and him showing me hospitality, showing me mercy, welcoming me back when I'm not worthy, but he makes me that way. Like he puts a ring on my finger and a robe around me and treats me in some ways like a way I don't want to be treated. Like I kind of want to feel, is like going to confession sometimes, like I kind of want a hard penance because I feel like I deserve it. And when I get like an easy one, it's like, okay, I don't deserve this anyways. And now it helps kill my pride in a lot of ways. Like I didn't deserve it anyways. And now I really can't pretend that I'm earning it like the older son. The second contemplation, and I hadn't ever really thought about this until this week, was obviously the Father in the story is Jesus and God the Father, and he's not like me. I would be hurt. I would be really, really, really hurt. And when people hurt us like that, when they say, I wish you were dead, I think if my daughter or son said that, it would really hurt. I'm sure it did hurt. It's interesting in the story that he asked for this. He doesn't ask for it. He doesn't even request it. He demands it. And then he stays around for like 2 days. I can imagine the father's like gut-wrenching hurt. And he seemingly puts that aside. So much so that he's waiting for his son to come back. We get this implication, at least, that the father is waiting for the son because he sees him far off, like he was waiting for him. Now, if that was accidental, I don't think Jesus would have added that in the parable. Like, oh, it was just an accident. He was like, he saw a deer, and then he saw his son as well. It was like he was looking off into the sky, and he accidentally saw his son. No, I have to believe it's intentional for him to add that. He was still far off, and he saw him, and his mercy overcame, or at least overshadowed, or I don't know, the desire for him to be back home overshadowed his hurt. And I think that would be true for me if my son or daughter did that. And I mean, even though it would still just like gut-wrenchingly hurt me, I still think I would be waiting like every day for her to come home and be looking like far off and waiting and waiting. And I would interrupt her, and I would like celebrate. For me as a father, it's like it's like Jesus kind of telling these Pharisees, like, how hard is your heart, man? How hard is your heart? I am not this God. I am a God of relationship. I mean, that's what I am a God that's a real father, for goodness sakes. How hard is your heart that your own son runs away and you wouldn't be waiting to receive them home? I don't know any good dad that wouldn't be doing that. And I think it's just a revelation to them that God is a relationship. It's this union of love. And being his beloved sons is exactly that. We are actually his beloved sons and daughters. It's not just a phrase we say for some theological understanding. God himself views it as a real relationship in the same way I see my daughter. That I would be waiting for him or her to come home. And I would be bawling, and I would interrupt their apologies, and I wouldn't even want to hear it. And it would dramatically overpower my hurt. Dramatically overpower my hurt. And I need to be reminded of the Father's relationship and desire to be a father, to be my dad, like Abba. And it's just hard. I see it a lot of times like the other son. Like, I just have to be in this servitude stance that I earn it, and I somehow make myself worthy, and there's no celebration in that. I mean, there's no celebration in that. There's no real relationship in that. And the Father is trying to tell the Son, like, this is a real relationship. This isn't just you working out to inherit the other half. Like, it's all yours. It's not mine. I'm a real father, for goodness sakes. I think that's the thing for me this week, I love doing these because, I get to go to places where, talking out loud is the way I get to it sometimes. And I think praying about it helps, it helps me get to some places. and doing a repetition. So I encourage you to do a repetition. Pray with this for the whole week. I'm recording this on, I don't even know, it's like Tuesday, I think. It's been a crazy week, so I've been late, but that's okay, whatever. But spend a whole week just going back to this story. There's new facets and openings and understandings and new things I think the Lord wants to tell you. There's certainly new things he wants to tell me every time. Some of them came out of my very mouth tonight. This relationship, this radical relationship, not this non-servitude relationship that, as a real dad, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer as a dad. There's nothing my daughter could do that I wouldn't open up my arms to receive her back home if she left. And I would celebrate because she's dead and now she's come back to life. It reminds me of this coming weekend's gospel. Maybe it's a different gospel. I don't know. Where Jesus reminds a sinner. Oh no, it's at the pools of Bethsaida when he heals the man and he comes back with the mat. It was today's gospel. And he says, "Sin no more, that nothing worse would happen to you." And what's the nothing worse, of course, is that I'd be out of a relationship with the Father. Not that I'd have some physical ailment again, but that I'd be out of relationship with the Father. I would be in exile again. I would run away again. That's way worse than being injured or sick. I gotta end it there. It's been a long one. So I am praying for you. Please pray for me. I'll see you next week. God bless.